The Giles Track. Named after the first European to explore the region in 1872, this trail is a flashback into the harshness of Central Australia and what our ancestors endured. The landscape remains largely untouched to this date, and the region was of significant importance as it held desperately needed water. This is my experience, turning back the clock and trying to imagine what it would have been like some 150 years ago. Righto, so that was hiking the Giles Track in the Northern Territory. It's about a 22-23 kilometre hike, but I ended up turning into about 50 k's purely because it's a point to point, and also I did a bit of exploring around the Kings Canyon area, which isn't included in the Giles Track. Backpedaling a little bit though, I ended up flying into Alice Springs Airport around midday. Just ducked into Alice Springs to get a gas canister, and then I absolutely booked it to Kathleen Springs, which is about a 3.5 hour drive. I got there around 4 o'clock-ish, which meant I had about an hour's worth of hiking up my sleeve. Did about 4 or 5 Ks in that time and just set up my tent not too far off the track. The next day was a pretty long day. I was up around sunrise and finished hiking only about half hour before the sun went down. In that time, I covered only about 20-25 kilometers, but that was purely because the landscape was so stunning and I spent way too long filming and just trying to soak it up as much as possible. Around midway through the Giles Track, I stumbled across this awesome landscape which looked like a miniature bungles, and I had no idea that these were there. I did bugger all research when I was planning on doing the Giles Track, so to come across that was really, really awesome. And yeah, spent way too long exploring that little area. I ended up dumping my pack, or a lot of my contents in my pack, not too long after this to lighten the load, because I knew I'd be coming back during the day at a later stage, which made it a lot easier to hike at a faster pace. But that also meant I had to return to that location later on in the day. And that caused a little bit of stress later on in the day because I spent way too long at Kings Canyon. That place is absolutely amazing, and I can see why so many people rave about it. Just sitting on top of that cliff area, I was probably there for about half hour or 45 minutes, just soaking it all up as much as I could. Also explored the little gorge area with the water for about half hour as well, and yeah, that was really, really cool as well. But by the time I realized how late it was getting in the day, I started to get a little bit stressed because I knew I had to get back to my gear, and I did a little bit of shortcuts on the way back just to make sure I could get back to it in time. I figured it probably saved about 45 minutes or an hour's worth of hiking, so it was definitely worth it. But yeah, by the time I got my gear, I was quickly running out of light, and I roughly knew where the campsite location was, but I didn't know where I was going to set up. I just followed this kind of dry riverbed, and eventually it came to this waterhole. I was a bit apprehensive at first because there was pretty much nowhere to set up my tent without the use of just setting it up on solid rock. And then I stumbled across this nice little sandy patch, and that was me done. It was absolutely awesome spending the night there in that little waterhole area. Birds chirping around me, especially in the morning. That was super, super nice to wake up to. And yeah, that was where I stayed on the second night. The third day was pretty much just a walk back to my vehicle. By the time I finished the hike, it was about midday. And that was when I headed straight to Uluru and the Olgas. Originally, it wasn't too crash hot on doing the Giles Track because it's usually done as an overnight track, but when I figured I could throw in the Olgas and Uluru in, yeah, that pretty much sold me. So I got to Uluru late afternoon and just spent the afternoon doing a bog lap around the base of Ayers Rock in the car, and also watched the sunset. That was really, really awesome as well. I'd actually been to the area a very long time ago, almost 20 years ago in 2002. I was a little young tacker, about 10 years old, and I still had some pretty vivid memories of the Olgas and Uluru, and that was super, super special to get the chance to go back and revisit some of those locations I had been to so many years ago. The next morning, I got up bright and early and headed out to the Olgas. I got out there and there wasn't a single soul to be seen. I couldn't believe it, but I figured everyone must have been at the lookouts for the Olgas or the lookout for Uluru. And that was completely fine by me, but it also blew my mind because I had the whole place to myself. And if there's one place you should have on your to-do list, It is the Olgas. It is just absolutely unreal and so hard to put into words how absolutely unbelievable this place is. I was hiking through that place completely by myself, and yeah, it was so special. And I don't know, I just got these vibes coming to me which I hadn't really ever got before, and it was just absolutely surreal to experience that sacred place by myself. So yeah, I cannot recommend doing the Olgas hike enough. Unfortunately, after I finished the Olgas, that was pretty much the trip done and dusted for me. I had about a 4.5 hour drive to Giles Springs, and I really wanted to do the Uluru base walk, but unfortunately, I just ran out of time, and it would have taken about 3 or 4 hours to do. But I'm just going to use that as an excuse to go back there in the future. It is super easy to see why it's such a popular tourist destination, and I would love to go back there sometime in the future. That's pretty much a wrap up for this one though. I've got an absolutely awesome hike planned in about 3 weeks time. I had planned to do this about a year ago, but unfortunately it was closed due to the whole COVID situation. So I'm really looking forward to this one, and I think it's going to be an absolute banger. If you made it this far, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.